Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to our celebration of Darwin Day. This is Evolution Shabbat. It's Evolution Weekend in many progressive congregations all over America. And because of that, of course, a humanistic congregation has to participate. Let's begin our celebration with lighting our Shabbat candles.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor b'shalom, b'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor, b'Shabbat.
With the onset of this Shabbat, we commit ourselves to nurture the plants and animals, the elements, the womb of sea and soil. We offer ourselves, our ability to create, our potential to stimulate the innovative energies of others and of ourselves. For the benefit of all the world, let us contemplate the significance of life, of the wonders of being human. May our human spirit open the paths of ingenuity, of healing and wonder, of contemplation, for Shabbat is here. Shabbat is here. We continue with Lecha Dodi.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabla. 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 Likrat Shabbat lehuven elcha, ki et habracha hi mevia, b'simcha brina uvetzohola, pnei Shabbat nekabla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabla.
Some people say that it all began with Aristotle. He illuminated a path to knowledge through critical observation. Francis Bacon taught the importance of hypothesizing, testing, and verifying. Galileo employed a wondrous tool that enabled humanity to observe the universe beyond what is revealed to the human eye. Newton systematized its motion, and Einstein begged his forgiveness when he uncovered marvels that Newton had not. And Darwin unlocked the mysteries of life. Over time, the world of the mind that they founded displaced naive faith. Humanity discovered that truth demands evidence, not obedience to authority. It requires us to vigorously interrogate reality, to validate our claims. It insists upon humility and the capacity to admit when we are mistaken. These are ingredients in the scientific method. Faith and science each offered a path to wonder and awe in the face of the grandeur of the universe, but their paths were never equal. Faith's false comforts ultimately call for submission. Science is oftentimes not comforting at all. But when it shows us the truth, its commandments can lead us to a better world. Albert Einstein spoke of meaning. There is a feeling of awe at the scheme that is manifested in the material universe. It does not lead us to take the step of fashioning a godlike being in our own image, a personage who makes demands of us and who takes an interest in us as individuals. There is in this neither a will, nor a goal, nor a must, but only sheer being. For this reason, people of our type see in morality a purely human matter, albeit the most important in the human sphere. And thus, Einstein observed, from the standpoint of daily life, there is one thing we do know, that we are here for the sake of each other, above all for those upon whose smile and well-being our own happiness depends, and also for the countless unknown souls with whose fate we are connected by a bond of sympathy. We continue with Afo Ori. The eminent biologist and author Rachel Carson wrote this: "Those who dwell, as scientists or laymen, among the beauties and mysteries of the earth are never alone or weary of life. Whatever the vexations and concerns of their personal lives, their thoughts can find paths that lead to inner contentment and to renewed excitement in living. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is symbolic as well as actual beauty in the migration of the birds, the ebb and flow of the tides, the folded bud ready for spring. There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the reassurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter." All of this means, of course, that when we are looking for our paths, we look within. We continue with Yesh Makom, there's a place.
Thank you.
birthday, Charles Darwin. Tonight, while other rabbis are delivering a Devar Torah, a word of Torah, I've decided to share with you a Devar Darwin. It was 212 years ago today that the man who would change our approach to biology and a whole lot more about our understanding of the world was born in Shropshire, England. In his honor, humanists and other science lovers now celebrate Darwin Day every year. We celebrate it for the purposes of Mr. Darwin himself, who was a great scientific role model, and we want to celebrate him, and also to celebrate science, the impact that it has made on our lives, how it's made them so much better. The pandemic is a great example of that. For most of the history of civilization, the impact of what we're going through would have been, if you can imagine it, so much worse. Yet in this instance, right from the very beginning, we knew where our salvation would come from. We knew that a vaccine would arrive, and it did, faster than we thought. And that's because of everything scientists have learned since Darwin about our biology. Of course, Darwin himself did not discover those blueprints for life, DNA and RNA, those discoveries that enabled the creation of at least two of our most promising vaccines. But think about it, without Darwin, would Rosalind Franklin and those Watson and Crick dudes who sort of rode her coattails to fame, would they have discovered them? Even as I learned about those worrisome variants that were in the news the last few weeks, mutating just as Darwin predicted they would under the forces of natural selection, I found myself feeling grateful to Rosalind Franklin, to Hugo de Vries before her, the man who conceived of the field of genetics, and the legions of scientists that followed them, who were reassuring us within days that they had already mapped those mutations. Can you imagine such a thing? And were preparing updated vaccines and boosters. All of this, in so many ways, is the legacy of Charles Darwin. Of course, when we're going to celebrate Darwin, we also have to realize that we're still living in a world of ignorance, where Darwin's revelations and science itself are called into question constantly. As recently as 2013, Pew conducted a survey in which researchers found that 60% of Americans claim that they accept the reality that humans and other organisms evolve over time. That's a pretty terrible showing, 60%, but it's worse news than that even, because what Pew found among that 60% was that the majority of them had significant misunderstandings about what exactly this theory says. They may have claimed that they accepted the reality that humans and other organisms evolve over time, but they don't seem to quite understand the key element of the theory, natural selection. When so many of them were asked about what was behind evolution, why it works, they cited God. They cited a supreme being. When we add them to the 33% of Americans who reject evolution entirely, who think that we're just created and we were just created and appeared on Earth as we are now since the beginning of time, which apparently was 6,000 years ago, well, it seems that not even 60% of Americans, in fact, a minority of Americans, really understand and accept the findings of evolution. Okay, putting that bad news aside, this is a celebration after all. Let me share some good news about non-adult Americans. And this came from Ann Reed, the executive director of the National Center for Science Education, which works so hard on evolution education and has something to show for it, according to the results published last June in the journal Evolution, Education, and Outreach. According to their findings, the proportion of U.S. secondary school biology teachers who present creationism, religious nonsense, as a scientifically valid alternative to evolution has fallen from 32% in 2007 to 18% in 2019. Perhaps they retired. That probably would have been a good thing. Just as encouraging, though, the amount of class time devoted to human evolution has shot up by 90%. Good tidings indeed. It shows us that the next generation may finally be receiving the preparation they need to live in this world where science matters. It mirrors those trends for the decline of fundamentalist religion. It bodes well for a better, less superstitious future. And if these science-oriented trends continue, maybe, just maybe, it heralds a future when climate change and other things that are facing us, if it's not already too late, will be brought to heel. When public health crises like the one that we're undergoing now are dealt with in a far better manner, with a far more knowledgeable public and more science-accepting leaders than we had when it hit the first time around. Okay, but back to Darwin. This is a celebration of him after all. I want to talk about a couple of other reasons to celebrate him. One is our social justice and equity agenda. I, for one, have felt for too long that when it comes to equality, our society's religious weaknesses have too long played a part. We keep hearing these time-worn religious exhortations, and I realize they're enshrined in our Declaration of Independence too. These ideas that we are all created equal, that we are created in the image of God. Well, that's good rhetoric, but really, it's not so helpful anymore. For one thing, the history of God and religion undermines those claims, something that anyone who reads the Bible itself knows very well upon encountering all the ways that both Scripture and its various religious interpretations for too long are replete with racism and misogyny and homophobia and violence. I hate to suggest this to my religious colleagues, but perhaps they might find more inspiration in, surprise, a Darwinian framework. I find it more convincing when I try to teach the lessons of social justice. To look at scientific truths that teach us that humans and all living things have the same common ancestors, that we and our fellow humans are much, much more similar than we are different, and that where there is different, it's individual different. It's not rooted in our groups. Our DNA bears that message of human equality. Could you imagine a world in which every young person learns this, in which every sermon given is given on this basis? Okay, finally, I want to talk about the man himself. I learned in a paper that I read by a wonderful teacher named Joel Cohen, writing for the National Institutes of Health, a little bit more about the kind of man Darwin was. He was not perfect, and he was certainly a creature of his own time. But he was also courageous and persistent and risk-taking. And he was joined in this by so many of that era, those Victorian times, when a small but determined group of scientists challenged long-standing and deeply held convictions about heavenly powers and divine intervention and the unchangeability of species. And thus did they build for us a new foundation that helped us better understand our origins and the real reasons for the diversity that we see on this planet. Darwin also made a tiny contribution to spirituality. Like Carl Sagan, a century later, Darwin had a way with words, and he could thus spark the human imagination, even as he told scientific truths. So that's where I'm going to leave you with my Devar Darwin, with words from The Origin of Species, where he wrote, "There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that whilst this planet has gone cycling on, according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved." These are words to embrace and reason for celebration. Happy birthday, Mr. Darwin, and happy Darwin Day to everyone. Let's continue with this song, written in a beautiful minor key, with words composed by none other than Sherwin Wine. Hamale ha'olam male yofi. The world is filled with beauty. Neil deGrasse Tyson wrote, "We are all connected, to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically. There's as many atoms in a single molecule of your DNA as there are stars in the typical galaxy. We are, each of us, a little universe." Carl Sagan put it this way, "The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." In that spirit, the spirit of peace and harmony and connectedness, we continue with Na'aseh Shalom. In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, we extend our well wishes to these members of our community and their loved ones, to Demi Bird, Karen Hansen, Deborah Luria, Julie Eliason, Karen Tremper Harris, Myron Tink, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, a refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Help us find the courage to make our lives a Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, we observe the yahrzeits of Samuel Bloch, Elsie Fleischer, William Ginsberg, Joseph S. Greenberg, Gertrude Hutt, Gertrude Meza, Rose Miller, Paul Molnar, Anna Musser, Lawrence Rubinstein, Morton Siegel, and Reva Hatch. May their memories be a source of comfort to those who live life now in their absence. That's our Darwin service for you tonight. I look forward to seeing you next week. And the following week, we have a special treat as we celebrate Purim with a little bit of a production that we went all the way to Shushan to make for you. We look forward to seeing you on Zoom classes and all the other virtual programs throughout the week. Miss you all very much, but we'll be together before we know it. Let's conclude with this upbeat, beautiful song, Peace Be With You.
Peace be with you.